Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Current Science and Technology Center here at the Museum of Science. My name is Eric. I'm an educator here at the museum. My pronouns are he and him, and we have a very special guest. We have NASA astronaut Bob Hines here with us today to tell us all about living and working in space. Bob, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. How are you guys doing? Awesome. It is so cool to see you guys. It is an honor to get to be here. I launched to the space station about almost exactly a year ago, April 27th of last year, and spent 170 days, so 6 months on orbit, and then returned in October of last year. And so I've got my gravity legs back, and I get to come around and talk to folks about the cool mission that we had. So really appreciate you guys coming. Really excited to see you guys. I hope you guys are all thinking of cool questions to ask for a little bit later. But I'll tell you a little bit about my background, how I got to the astronaut office, and then we'll talk about my mission, and then a little bit about the things that NASA's got coming in front of us. So, again, think of questions. I'm watching you guys. All right, expect big things. So I am a Boston University graduate, so I planned ahead to go to orbit and bring my Boston roots with me, it was really special. Got to do a downlink with some BU students and Boston University Academy and some local high school and middle school students about halfway through my mission. So that was really special. I had the opportunity to come back this week and reconnect in 3 dimensions with some of those students. So that was really been a fun week for us, and we were able to tag this event onto the end of that. So really glad to be here. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for being here. I am married. My beautiful wife, Kelly, they're all in town. They'll be here in a little bit. You might see them floating around, not literally floating around. My oldest daughter, Kat's a sophomore in college. She's doing a pre-med track after briefly exploring doing music. And then Sarah is a sophomore in high school, and Julia is a second grader. So we have the school system surrounded, and they're all really incredible people, and really just have been really supportive of my missions and my career, and couldn't have done it and wouldn't be here without them. Whoops. Sorry, jumping ahead. So for my background, my dad was in the Army, and so we moved around a lot. Even when he got out of the Army, he had a job that we just moved all the time. I went to 9 different schools in kindergarten through 12th grade. The last 3 years of high school, thankfully, were in the same high school. So if you do the math, I did 8 schools in kindergarten through 9th grade. So that's moving a lot. I was always the new kid, and eventually got comfortable with being the new kid and making new friends. My avenue to do that was sports. So I landed on cross country, basketball, and track. I tried golf one season. Became clear I did not have a future in golf, even though I liked it. So I came back and eventually ended up getting a track scholarship to BU, which is what ultimately drew me up here. But through all of that, ever since I was little, for as long as I could remember, I always wanted to fly. I loved airplanes. And that picture up there in the top left, that is me at about 2 or 3 years old at the Munich airport in Germany, just looking out the window, watching all the airplanes taxi around. So as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated with airplanes and just wanted to do something associated with aviation. Finished high school, a little town in northeast Pennsylvania, cleverly named Mountaintop. Bet you can't guess where it sits. Yes, it's at the top of a mountain. Came here to BU, and then during my Air Force career, I knew that I wanted to do test pilot school, and I thought a master's degree would make me more competitive for that. And at the time, the only distance learning master's degree that I could find was University of Alabama. And so that's where I ended up going, and they were very accommodating to the military lifestyle and the timelines that we needed to be able to do that. And then by accident, once I got into test pilot school, the test pilot school actually got accredited while I was there, and so I got a bonus master's degree at the end of that. I joined the Air Force a couple years after graduating from BU, and went through flight school in Columbus, Mississippi, and got selected to stay there as a first assignment instructor pilot, so we call a FAPE. So I was flying this, I don't know if this is going to work. Nope, can't see it. Airplane up there in the top left is a T-37, so I was an instructor pilot in that. So people who have never flown an airplane before, teaching them how to fly for the first time. It wasn't the assignment I wanted. It wasn't the one I asked for, but it's the one I got, and I ended up actually loving it. It was really, really cool getting to teach people to fly. After 3 years of that, got assigned to fly Strike Eagles, the F-15E. We were stationed in England for that, and then went on to test pilot school from there. 1 year at test pilot school, you fly 30 different airplanes, and you learn how to mesh the engineering and the pilot worlds. And so you can become the translator between the people that are designing and building the airplanes and the people that are flying the airplane. Really special. It was the perfect job for me. I absolutely loved it. But at one point in my career, about 12 years in, what the Air Force wanted to do with my career wasn't really matching what I needed to do with my family and for my family. And so I made the decision to leave active duty. But I still want to serve the country, so I joined the Air Force Reserve. And as part of that, that's a part-time gig. So I needed a day job, which was a research pilot at NASA. So I picked this job up. It was an incredible opportunity. I saw it as my only way to touch the space program. I always loved the space program. I was watching it as a kid. I just never really saw an avenue into it. And so this was the kind of that chance to just be a small cog in that wheel that is the space program. That airplane up there in the top left is a T-38, and the astronauts fly that as training. And so they have a cadre of instructors that are not astronauts, but their job is to be the instructors and the safety pilots for the astronaut office. And so that was the way that I got to touch the space program, and it was really incredible. Got to fly these other 4 airplanes, which are really neat. The one on the bottom left is the Vomit Comet. So that's the one that does these parabolas and simulates zero-G inside the payload section. Probably the one airplane that it's more fun to be in the back than the front, in my opinion. The other airplanes do different kinds of science and research, high altitude, or strapping things underneath the bottom of the airplane, but really, really cool job. After about 4 years, a couple of the astronauts said, hey, we have a selection process getting started for the astronaut office. Have you thought about throwing your hat in the ring? And so I took that as a hint, or at least a suggestion to maybe throw an application in. And I took their suggestion, threw an application in, and in June of 2017, I got the phone call asking, offering me a new job if I wanted to join the 22nd group of NASA astronauts. Obviously, that's a dream come true, getting that phone call, and incredibly special to get to join these other 11 individuals, all amazing people, incredibly humbling to get to be a part of a group of people like this. We had 18,000 people apply the year that I got selected, and they picked 12. So the other people that we met along the way that we're all interviewing, just absolutely incredible people. And, I kept thinking that this was just going to end at any point, because I didn't feel there was any way I was going to get picked over the other people that I was seeing in that process. So what an incredibly humbling opportunity. We joined up with 2 Canadians that were selected through a separate process in Canada. And together we became the class that was known as the Turtles. We all get nicknames. Our class became known as the Turtles. So this is the composition of our class, kind of the professional backgrounds. You can see there's lots of different ways to become an astronaut. It's not all just fighter pilots and test pilots. In fact, we're a minority in the office now. Scientists, every flavor of scientist, every flavor of engineer. There's lots of different paths to get to the astronaut. You can see down at the bottom, other folks in the office. We have 2 educators. They were high school science teachers. In fact, one of them is the chief astronaut right now. So my boss, chief of all the astronauts, was a former high school science teacher when he got selected to be an astronaut. And a veterinarian. That's my daughter's favorite. That kicks off 2 years of training. So 2 years of basic training in a whole big swath of different topics. The hardest physically is spacewalk training. We are in the suit that you can see up there in the top right. The spacesuit is pressurized. It looks very fluffy and easy to move around. It's not. Because it's filled with air and it's pressurized, it's a lot of work to move that thing around. If you can picture, every time you want to grab something with your hands, you're having to put the force that if you're squeezing a tennis ball. That's kind of what it feels like. And so you're fighting against that all the time. And we're in there for like 6.5 or 7 hours. So at the end of that, your forearms are burning, your muscles are really tired. And the flight surgeons say we spend the same number of calories doing that a marathon runner does. So it's a big effort. That was the hardest physically. The hardest mentally for me was learning the Russian language. The Russians are the second largest partner on the International Space Station. So the international agreements are that we have to learn the Russian language and be qualified to a level of intermediate mid on whatever scale they're using. And so we get evaluated by our Russian instructors periodically, and we cannot get assigned to a space flight until we reach that level. I am not wired to learn a language. That was really hard. I was getting up at 3:30 in the morning, studying vocabulary cards and just learning how to conjugate verbs and all that kind of stuff. Things I never thought were part of astronaut training. But really cool learning a lot about different cultures and things like that along the way. Once that was over, picked up a technical job as the Orion technical lead for the astronaut office, working cockpit design, software reviews, and things like that to get the new Orion capsule ready for flight. And then also, as we started looking at lunar landers, became the handling qualities technical lead and did that for about 2 years before getting a phone call that said, hey, if you're not busy for the next couple of years, we'd like you to go to space. And I thought, that's going to be a fun thing. So I'll go ahead and take that. And just really an honor to get to join up with the rest of my crewmates. Kjell Lindgren is a physician. He was our commander. I was the pilot. Samantha Cristoforetti is an Italian astronaut. And then Jessica Watkins was one of my classmates in the Turtles. And she is a geologist. So really cool to get to pair up with one of my classmates and those other individuals to be part of the Crew 4 mission to the International Space Station. So our families are lined up. That's the last chance we get to wave to them. And then we come up with a cheesy cheer. And then we get into in this case, the Teslas. We get into the Teslas that drive us out to the launch pad. We go past the iconic vehicle assembly building, one last look at our rocket, ride the elevator up, and then walk across the crew access arm to get into the spacecraft. The SpaceX folks help us get in and strapped in. They make sure everything's good to go, close the hatch, and wave us goodbye. It's the last time we see anybody else for 6 months. The ride uphill was absolutely incredible. The acceleration in the last 90 seconds was amazing. And as soon as it feels like it's out of control, the engines cut off and dead silence instantaneously, and you look out the window and you see the Earth going by. And we set the record for the fastest rendezvous of a U.S. vehicle to the space station, so about 15 hours. Doesn't sound fast, but it's pretty busy. And so we come up underneath space station, fly around the front, and then dock on the overhead compartment. So we get out of our suits, we come in, and we get to see our colleagues for the first time. That was a ballistic entry. So that crew had been there. That was the end of their 6-month mission. We overlapped for about a week and a half. It kind of taught us the way things were being operated on space station that were maybe slightly different from our training. And then they give us the keys, then they go home. And so we get to join up then with our 3 cosmonaut colleagues who actually launched about 3 weeks before us. And the 7 of us then are running the International Space Station for the next 6 months. The whole reason we're there is to do science. The space station is a national laboratory. We've got national laboratories throughout the country. This one just happens to be orbiting about 250 miles above the Earth. So there's lots of different science experiments on board, 250 different experiments at any given time, both inside and outside the space station. We get to touch all different avenues of science. It could be metallurgy, biology, microbiology. We did DNA sequencing. We're doing gene identification up here in the top left. We do combustion science, where we look at the way different materials combust and flames propagate. Just all different kinds of things. And we spend about 70% of our time doing science and about 30% doing maintenance to keep things running. One of my favorite things up there, and I am not, despite my Air Force call sign is farmer, and that is not agricultural. We can talk about that later. But I do not have a green thumb. I do not garden on Earth. It is not something that I do. But I tell you, in space, I loved growing plants and that kind of thing out there. It was absolutely amazing. And we were the first crew to grow tomatoes successfully in space. We had about 14 tomatoes on the plants by the end of our mission. Visiting vehicles come up periodically. We have to grapple them sometimes and berth them to the International Space Station. And then those are really busy because we're unloading them and then reloading them with either trash, or in the SpaceX example, we're reloading them with the science experiments to get the data back down. We also had the Starliner. Boeing Starliner will be our next human-rated vehicle. That came up to visit for the very first time while we were up there, and so that was incredibly special to get to be the first people to board that spacecraft in space. But it's not all work up there. Obviously, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And so we always take the opportunity when we have it to just have fun and being up there. This is us trying to formation fly, not very well as we crash into things. Samantha is doing her Wonder Woman impression. And this is Waddy as the amazing Spider Woman. And the next one's the worst one. And then Chell flying Wonder Woman's invisible jet. It is not lost on us how privileged we are to get to work in zero gravity. You can see the smile on Waddy's face, but the opportunity to just float around and enjoy being in zero G is incredibly special. And there's a cast of thousands that make that possible, and we're the fortunate ones that gets to experience it. The opportunity to be curious about how things behave in zero G is really special. Just putting a water bubble out there and letting it float. And then what happens when you blow some air into that water bubble? And it turns out if you put too much air into it, just like any bubble, it'll eventually burst. We are conscious of the fact that there are electronics all around us, so we've got a towel nearby. Lots of outreach events, and we'll take every chance to mess with each other. If it was funny once, it's funny twice. So that is Chell wrapped up in one of our sleeping bags.
We just need to be careful not to break the chat ball.
And of course, we have to take care of our bodies. Being in zero G is incredibly hard on the human body. Our cardiovascular system doesn't have to work as hard to fight against gravity, so it actually atrophies. Your heart gets weaker if you don't do anything about it. So we have cardio devices like a treadmill and an exercise bike, although it's a bike with no handles and no seat, which is really weird to get used to. But that's how we exercise and keep our heart strong. And then we have this incredible device called ARED, which is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. We can pull forces equivalent to 600 pounds on that thing, and it can be configured to do all kinds of exercises: deadlifts, squats, shoulder press, sit-ups, and that's what staves off bone loss. Just like our muscles, our skeletal system doesn't need to be as strong, so our body starts getting rid of bone density and bone mass. And so to stave that off, we're doing these kinds of exercises. And so we're exercising about 2.5 hours every day up there just to keep ourselves healthy. And then just like on Earth, food is a social thing. Jessica had a birthday a couple weeks after we got up there, so we scrounged up the different things. Those are muffin tops, and we stacked them up with some butterscotch pudding and made her a birthday cake. We'll get together with our colleagues. We'll share stories about our families and things that went on during the week. And occasionally we'll have themed dinners like a pizza night or a taco night and that kind of thing. They are not as good as pizzas down here, but you'll take what you can get once you've been in space for a while. And then, of course, what would be flying in space without looking out the window? The cupola is this 7-window observatory looking down at the Earth, and just is an incredible opportunity to see the Earth. So we can use it for scientific research. Jessica was a geologist. She did work on multiple field sites around the world, and being able to see those from an orbital perspective was very useful, and directly applies to us going back to the moon, where we're able to see the moon from a satellite we have called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and picking out the sites that we're going to go investigate on the surface of the moon for scientific research when we get back. But it's not all about the science, right? Looking out the window and observing the planet is fundamental to the human experience of human spaceflight. And it is not lost on us what a privilege it is to look out the window and to see the incredible planet that we live on and the beauty and the show that the Earth puts on underneath us. The range of colors that you see in a given orbit is just spectacular. The deep blues, the incredibly bright greens of the Amazon rainforest, the white clouds, the Mediterranean is beautiful, and then you have the green forests of Eastern Europe, and it is just amazing. And the night passes are spectacular. We get to see 16 sunrises and sunsets every single day, and the sunrises and sunsets are just beautiful. The range of colors from deep violets to really bright yellows just can't be matched. But the night passes are probably the most beautiful, at least in my opinion. The city lights are amazing. Thunderstorms and the flashing lightning just would sit there in stunned silence looking at the beauty of the light show. This is a pass up the East Coast. You can see Atlanta, and then way up at the distance at the very end was Boston. Now, we were up there during a couple periods of heightened geomagnetic activity, and we would get aurora forecasts from the ground, but much like weather down here, they're not always very accurate. And there were times like this where they were forecast to be low activity, and we would just pop our head into the cupola and just see this incredible aurora that was out there. And you just hear us saying, wow. You'd see somebody in the cupola, and all you'd hear coming out of the cupola was, wow. And so we'd all dive in there, and we would just sit there and just silently observe this incredibly beautiful sight. But alas, all good things must come to an end. And on October 14th of last year, we had to suit up and bid a fond farewell to our colleagues. Our replacement crew arrived about a week prior, and so we got them spun up, gave them the keys to space station, and then we got closed the hatch and got ready to come home. We set another record for the fastest return of a U.S. vehicle. So just over 4.5 hours from undock, we were splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean. After deorbit burn, the way orbital mechanics work, you deorbit burn to slow down, but then you start falling. And as you fall, you start getting faster and faster. And I remember being about half the altitude of space station and looking out the window as we crossed the West Coast. We're going about 3 miles a second faster than the space station at this point. And it just felt like we were screaming across the cloud tops. We're still 100 kilometers up, but man, we were going fast. And then the next thing I know, I come inside, I check something on the displays, I look out the window again, and we're over the East Coast of the United States. It was so fast how quick we crossed the states. But after you've been falling for that long, there is no more beautiful sight than seeing those orange and white parachutes open up. And what a beautiful day off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Not a cloud in the sky, late afternoon sun, and the Atlantic was as smooth as I've ever seen it. We were the first crew since Apollo to land in the Atlantic Ocean, and it was as smooth as could be. SpaceX was really quick to get on the vehicle, get us out of the water, and I will never forget when they cracked that hatch, that breath of fresh air, first fresh air we've had in 6 months. So we're finally not smelling each other. We get to smell some nice fresh Florida air. And it was just amazing. The flight surgeons check on us, make sure we're okay, and then they extract us from the vehicle. They take us to a medical bay, they check up on us, we get out of our suits, get on a helicopter, and it's planes, trains, and automobiles to get home. It's actually helicopters, airplanes, and vans. But long trip home, 2-hour flight back home, and when the door of the airplane opens, it's the first time we get to see our friends and family in 6 months. This was the middle of the night, probably about 2 in the morning. So all these folks, stayed up late to come out to the airport and say hi to us. And what an incredibly special way to end a mission. We're just the 4 people that get to sit on the pointy end of the rocket. There are casts of thousands that make it happen. And to come home and see them waiting for us and greeting us and know that they were supporting our families and us while we were on board the space station was really, really special. A mission like this and a big, what you might see as an achievement is a real good opportunity to reflect, and it's a unique part of our job is looking back on how we got here. One of the things that I find interesting is that this is what I thought I was going to do coming out of high school. This was my plan, right? I wanted to go to a military academy after graduation. I wanted to go to flight school and become a fighter pilot. The astronaut thing wasn't even on my radar. I love the space program, but I just never even considered that as a goal. Those guys were superheroes to me, and so it was just something I never really thought about. But this is what I thought I was going to do, and this is what it actually ended up looking like. And so, you see those different things and those different twists and turns out there, and especially for the younger folks out there, I would say you can look at those things as failures. You can look at those things as roadblocks. I see them more as course corrections along the way. And so the perspective of looking back is often very valuable. And so you can take those things as a roadblock and say, well, I guess it's not going to happen. Or you can take it as a course correction and just find another path. And I think that, how you approach those things is pretty valuable. And looking back along it, there's nothing I would change. I absolutely loved every step of the journey, and that was incredibly special. And so I think that that's something that every single astronaut would tell you is that when we got selected to the astronaut office, it was a bittersweet experience because we were leaving behind something that we absolutely loved. And so that's a great spot to be, because even if we didn't get selected to the astronaut office, we were doing something that we love to be doing. So given that perspective, what are the things that I found valuable to me? To me, my faith in God and the support of my family were incredibly important, and I couldn't have gotten through it without them and their support along the way. Having a passion is kind of what guided me. Those little course corrections, were kind of the bookends, but what I was constantly pursuing was something that I was interested in, which was airplanes and aviation and aerospace. And then humility is incredibly important, right? There's a lot of us in this room. There's a lot of people that we encounter every day, and every single one of them is affecting the person and the leader that you're going to become. And so you should honor them and respect them for it and realize that you have that same role in their life. And so realizing that we all have that role in each other's lives is, I think, incredibly valuable and really will help us be very functional in society. And then enjoy your journey, right? You're the only one who gets to do it. Nobody's journey in here is going to look like anybody else's. Certainly not going to look like mine. Mine's not going to look like yours. And if you make it about the journey and enjoying the journey, which I think if you do those first 3 things up there, you'll enjoy the journey. And then it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And you're enjoying it along the way. I think that's really important. So enough of that little mini soapbox there. Talk about, wow, that thing's going crazy on me. Man, I stole my thunder. All right. So future of human spaceflight. Where's NASA trying to go? I already gave you the answer. Kids, where's NASA want to go? To space, that's right. We're trying to go to a planet. Someone said it. Mars, that's right. So we're trying to go to Mars. Do you guys know how far apart or how far away Mars is? Wow, that's a lot. 2.5 thousand million miles. That's a lot. You're close. It's 14.9 million on average, right? It changes as they go around the planet, but on average, about 14 million miles. You probably have a better number than I have on that, but it's really far away, right? And so before we go there, we have a lot of problems and technical challenges that we need to solve. And so we need really smart guys like all you young folks. As you grow up and get smart on science, we're going to need all your help to figure out how we're going to solve those things. How do we protect the crew from radiation? How do we supply food for a 2-year mission to keep the crew running? We get, in the space station, we get resupply vehicles nonstop, right? Every couple months we get resupply vehicles that bring water, food, and air. And we're really good at recycling water and air right now, probably recycle about 95 to 98% of that, but we still need resupplies occasionally. So we need to continue to refine that stuff. And then the physiological challenges. How do we keep the human body healthy, and how do we be able to do tasks as soon as we land on the surface of Mars? Because we can't take 2-3 weeks or months to recover when we get there. We're going to have work to do. So before we can go here, we're going to go here. We're going to go back to the moon, and we're going to go back differently than we did with Apollo. This time we're going to go back to stay, and we're going to figure out how to do the things that we're going to do on Mars. We're going to figure out how to do here, and we're going to do it as part of the Artemis program. So the Artemis program is, it's kicked off a little while ago. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but the first step is going back to the moon. So we're going to do that on a new rocket, currently the most powerful rocket ever built. It's the SLS, the Space Launch System. And then at the top of it, it can be configured to either carry crew or it can carry cargo. It can carry a lot of cargo to lunar orbit, and that's why it's so important. There's a lot of other rockets up there, out there right now, but they don't have the capacity to carry this much mass to lunar orbit. And so that's a really important thing. And then we have on the top right there, that is the Orion spacecraft. That is our new human-rated spacecraft that is rated to go out into deep space and take crews back to the moon. These have been PowerPoint slides for a long time. We were talking about that earlier. But just in November, we launched the first SLS rocket. Did anybody get to watch that? Yeah, that thing's amazing, right? To watch that thing launch to space and launch from Cape Canaveral, launching from the United States, was absolutely spectacular. And it's kicking off this amazing time in our era. Like, we and you guys are all part of the Artemis generation. And you guys are going to be seeing people walking on Mars in your lifetime. And that is a pretty incredible thing to think about. And it's all starting with that. And then the next phase of that is Artemis II, where we're going to send a crew in there, and we're going to send them on a lap around the moon. And it'll be the first time we've been back to the moon in 50 years. They are not landing. They're just going to do a lap around the moon and check out the Orion systems and make sure that everything works appropriately for that. And like I said, it's getting real. Who saw the big announcement on Monday? Yeah, these guys are awesome. These are all friends and colleagues that we've known for years. And these are the 4 that are going to go out there, 4 pioneers that are going to go out and be the first ones out around the moon. So they are kicking off training this week. I think they were on the Late Show. So after the Late Show, they're kicking off their training to go back to the moon. Artemis III, then, is the first one where we go and land on the moon. Landing on the moon, again, first time in 50 years, absolutely incredible. This time we'll meet up with a lunar lander. So we're going to send the lander to the moon. Orion goes to the moon. It meets up with it. Half the crew gets in the lander, goes to the surface, and then comes back, meets up with Orion, and they come home on Orion. That's the idea. SpaceX has been given the contract for that first landing, so they are the lunar lander that we're going to be using. You can see this Starship is big. You see the astronauts down there at the bottom, and they got to ride that elevator all the way to the top. That's 9 stories all the way up to the top. That's a garage, and then above the garage is the flight deck. And then Gateway is like a miniature space station that's getting built around the moon. Think of it like a bus stop. So I was at BU earlier. So like the Kenmore bus station orbiting the moon. And Orion goes and docks there. There will already be a lunar lander or 2 already docked to it. And so that's kind of where the crew goes. They can get, come into the Gateway. They can do different science experiments and things there. And the folks that are going to be going down to the surface will board their lunar lander from there, head to the surface, and then Gateway becomes the persistent outpost around the moon. Japan has agreed to build a pressurized rover for us so it can rove around on the moon. So that one on the top right up there, if you guys have seen The Martian, right? Mark Watney was driving around a rover, a pressurized rover. This is kind of that equivalent. And so we'll be having one of those on the moon. And here in the next month or two, we're going to award the contract for the unpressurized rover so we get a dune buggy on the moon. So we're really excited about that. And the point with all of this is that it's real. Like, this isn't PowerPoint slides anymore. I mean, this is PowerPoint slides. But Gateway, the hardware, is actually in place. It's supposed to launch here in the next year and a half or so. SLS has launched. Orion has launched. We've got crews assigned to missions. And oh, by the way, during all of that, we're doing space station operations 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Look how many human-rated spacecraft we're working on right now. It is an incredibly exciting time to be involved in space. The future is bright as we commercialize low Earth orbit and NASA starts pivoting into deep space exploration. It is just an amazing, amazing time to be here. And it's such an honor to be part of the astronaut office and get to be part of these incredible things that are happening. But we look to all of you guys for your help as we start trying to push our way to Mars. So thank you guys for being here. I will open the floor for whatever questions you guys have.
Thanks so much, Bob. So we have time for a couple questions from here and from our audience online. So if you're online, you can go ahead and use the comments, the Slido code. But we'll start with somebody who has a question here.
How many times have you been to space?
Good question. I have been, this was my first trip to space. So I was all wide-eyed and just trying to take it all in. But this is my first trip to space. And now if you've ever been to a park and like you ride a cool roller coaster and you want to ride it again, you got to go back to the end of the line and wait until you get to the front again. I'm standing in line again now.
Who else has a question?
Did you ever touch the moon?
Did you ever touch the moon?
Did I ever touch the moon? No, not yet. I'll let you know if I get a chance, though, definitely.
All right, we have a question over here.
Are you going to go back to space again?
I hope so. So we are all we have like jobs that we have to do in between, but then we are all kind of getting our chance to go into space. We have new astronauts that it's really important that they get to fly to space, and then we all once we fly, we all kind of get in line and we start waiting our turn to go back again.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it to get into the Air Force? Because I really want to join.
Oh, that's awesome. So I would say if you want to do it, you can do it 100%. Don't let anything discourage you from doing it. Much like my astronaut thing. It's easy to look at it. There were 18,000 people that applied when I applied to the astronaut office. They picked 12. But had I not applied, I wouldn't have ever known. So the only way to, the only way to know is throw your hat in the ring. And I promise you that if you are a hard worker and you have good character, the Air Force will definitely take you. We are always looking for people like you.
Like, when you were launching, did it hurt?
Did it hurt while we were launching? I don't think it's hurting is what it felt like. But as we accelerate and this aircraft starts accelerating faster and faster, the G forces build, the gravity forces build. And at the end, it's like 5 Gs, and it feels like there's an elephant sitting on your chest. So that doesn't sound very pleasant, but it's and it only lasts for a short time. But boy, I tell you what, it is just so fun watching the instruments that are telling you how fast you're going and seeing that. It is just amazing. So even though it's a little uncomfortable feeling like that elephant's on your chest, it is definitely worth it. It is amazing to be going that fast. And then when those engines cut off, it is instantaneous, and it's just dead silence, and then you're in orbit.
So we have a question from our online audience. What's the best part of being an astronaut?
Wow, there's so many cool things about being an astronaut. The whole thing is really humbling, and getting to be part of the amazing teams that are doing and solving these incredible problems. One of my favorite things is getting to come out and do this kind of stuff. We certainly are doing some, NASA's doing some amazing things, in terms of exploring outer space and all of that. But getting to come and talk to all of you young folks, and, you guys someone in here could be the first person to walk on Mars. And to have the opportunity to be in your presence, that you could be the first person on Mars, is really, really cool for me.
What's your favorite planet?
My favorite planet? That's a good question. So before I went to space, my favorite planets were either Jupiter or Saturn, probably Saturn, because I love the rings. After being in space, it's Earth. It is, I mean, in space, the Earth is unique. It is so beautiful. And until somebody proves otherwise, it is the only place that harbors life. And we are privileged enough to get to live on it. And it is so beautiful. It has so many different colors. And it's just such a beautiful place. And so Earth is my favorite place now.
I have two. How did you meet other people on Earth if they didn't go up and down?
How did I meet other people on Earth after going up and down? Like, how did I get to see them?
After you went like on Earth.
How did you meet other people when talk to other people?
When he was in the spaceship, how he spoke to people.
How did you communicate with the Earth?
Oh, how did we communicate with the Earth while we were in space? So we have actually really good connectivity. I've done a lot of military deployments, and we would get one phone call a week for 15 minutes, and some random person would come on every 5 minutes, go, "You have 10 minutes left. You have 5 minutes left." You're like trying to talk to my wife. You have 1 minute left, sir. So on the space station, we have pretty good connectivity. We have an IP phone, which is like a telephone on your laptop. And as long as we had satellite coverage, I could call home. So I got to talk to my family almost every night. And then once a week, we actually got a video conference with them. And some of the hardest kids to impress are astronauts' kids. And so after the first couple weeks of that, where they saw Dad do flips in 0G, then they were like, "All right, we're done." And so it was kind of like those uncomfortable video calls of nobody's interested, but you're still hanging out. But certainly very special to get to see them and have them participate in it. I would take the computer down to the cupola occasionally and set the webcam up just so that they could look out the window with me and see what we were passing over at the time. And so that was really, really special. It was a good question.
If you want to become an astronaut, what is the best job?
Any job, I would say. It is whatever you are interested in is the best way to do it. So as long as the minimum requirements are you have to be a U.S. citizen and you have to have a master's degree in a STEM field. So science, technology, engineering, or math. As long as you have meet those requirements, you can apply. And I will say the biggest thing that gets people in the door is being a good teammate and a good person and being able to work around and respect lots of different people. So those are really important qualities. There's a lot of people that get into the interview, but the thing that really sets the people apart that get selected is how they work in those teams together.
What is your current job?
What's my current job? So I'm still an astronaut. When we come back, we have about 6 months of reconditioning and reintegration with our families, and then coming around and talking about our mission a little bit. And then we go back into the office and have these different technical jobs. I'll be working on what we call the joint test team to help our next crewed vehicle, which is the Boeing Starliner, kind of get to the finish line, get their first crewed missions out the door.
All right, we've got time for one more question, and then Bob will be downstairs from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, where you get a chance to meet him, ask him a question, maybe take a selfie. So we're going to go downstairs in just a minute. We got time for one more question in our program.
Was it hot in the pod when you were going back to Earth?
Was it hot inside of the spacecraft coming back?
Oh, that's a good question. So we're in, during re-entry, we are in our launch and re-entry suits. And those have an umbilical that send air inside the suit. And so it's a little bit hard to tell. I think the heat that is built up on the outside of the spacecraft definitely soaks into the spacecraft, but it takes a long time to do it. The outside and the heat shield protect us really, really well. But that is something that they look at, because once we land in the water, there is a certain amount of time where avionics and things like that can start feeling some of that heat. It just takes a lot of time for that to get through there. And it's not nearly as bad as the 3,000 degrees that the heat shield's encountering on the way that we're re-entering. So for the astronauts in our suits, we don't really feel it. In fact, we're actually pretty cold because to get the whole vehicle ready to re-enter, they call it a pre-chill, and they get all the avionics and stuff as cold as they can possibly get it so that it can handle the heat of re-entry.
All right, so that's all the time we have for our program. Like I said, we're going to give Bob a break for a minute, let him have some water, and then we'll be downstairs in our Blue Wing well to meet Bob, and you can ask him a question and talk to him for a second from about 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So we'll be downstairs. Look for us there. Bob, thanks so much for joining us here at the museum.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, everybody. It's great talking with you.